Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Vo. I'm a principal regional planner here in the planning strategy at SCAG. Thank you for taking the time today to attend our Toolbox Tuesday. As you are already aware, Professors Ra Baek and Do Kim from the Cal Poly Pomona Urban Regional Planning Department are presenting their research titled A Guide to Navigating Existing and Emerging Sources of Local VMT and Travel Data. So before we start the presentation, here are some housekeeping items for your information. The meeting is roughly 90 minutes long. This meeting is being recorded. All participants' line will be muted. At the end of the session, there will be a Q&A session for you to freely ask questions. In the meantime, you can also type in your questions in the chat box, and our team in the back end will be able to capture and report it. We will also log all questions and voice a selection at the end of the presentation as well in the Q&A session. The recording of this webinar and PowerPoint slides will be available on the SCAG website. We will send a link to everyone who has registered after the event in roughly about a week. So for our agenda today, we will briefly introduce SCAG's Connect SoCal 2024 regional plan, then get into the meat of the session, which is about a guide to navigating existing and emerging sources of local VMT and travel data conducted by Cal Poly Pomona. This guide includes statewide research findings from many regional and local governments and the available data and tools that can help you to plan sustainably on the land use and transportation. Before we start, we would like to do a quick survey to see where you are from and which sector you represent today in the room. So with that, Jennifer, would you mind launch the polling questions? So the first question that we are asking you is, what best describes the type of organization you are representing today? And the selections are from community member, advocacy organization, school or academic institution, tribal organization, local government, county government, regional government, state government, federal government, private company, and something else. The second question is about what describes where you are today. Are you in the SCAG region, which consists of all the 6 counties that listed here: Imperial, Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, and and Ventura, or somewhere else in California, or somewhere else in the US? All right, so the folks are still submitting their submissions, so just give it a few more seconds here. Okay, I think it's good to close the polling question now, Jennifer. Is it already closed?
Of closed, and these are the results.
Okay, so for the first question, we see a lot of folks in this room from local governments, followed by regional governments and private companies. And for the second question, where you are from today, most folks are from within the SCAG region, which is good, and a few are somewhere else, somewhere in California. So thank you for those of you who are outside of the SCAG region for joining us today. And I'm so sorry, I should have shared the result. Okay, there we go. Stop sharing and continue on with the presentation. Okay, so the first item that I want to talk to you about is Connect SoCal introduction. So One of SCAG's main products is Connect SoCal. It is one of the primary documents that SCAG, as the NPO for Southern California, is responsible for preparing. This document defines the collective vision and goals for the region, which directly related to SB Senate Bill 375 focuses on sustainable community strategy, and SB 743, which focuses on VMT. Through this process, we must meet a number of federal and state requirements. This plan includes over $750 billion in transportation investments by 2050, along with policies and strategies that enable us to comply with these requirements. Why is Connect SoCal important? Not only does it guide us toward a sustainable and equitable future, but it's also critical for ensuring state and federal funding. As an NPO, our responsibility is to meet state and federal requirements, and there are consequences to failing to demonstrate transportation conformity or meet GHG greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. Demonstrating federal requirements is necessary for advancing local and regional projects, regardless of funding sources. There are also state programs tied to our state GHG emission reduction target. For reference, because our 2020 plan meet the target, the SCAG region was able to receive nearly $1.5 billion in the past 3 years from the state programs. This plan that we are presenting to you today does meet these requirements and will allow us to continue receiving state and federal funds for transportation projects. To conduct long-range planning, we first assess what's going on in the region today and look at local plans. SCAG also looks at the current research on effective policies and strategies, as well as trends affecting the region. We're also engaging with leaders, stakeholders, and the public across the region. This plan has been gone through a robust public hearing process and is anticipated to be adopted by, at the upcoming SCAG Regional Conference and General Assembly in Palm Desert on May 2nd and 3rd. So if you are interested in attending this conference, please register for this event, and we can put the link here in the chat for you. With that, I will now pass it on to Professor Ra Baek to go into the details of the research and the guide that they have been working on. So with that, the floor is yours, Sora.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Ra Baek, a faculty member at Cal Poly Pomona and the PI of this research. This research topic was submitted by ARB, or Air Resources Board, back in 2022. It aims to understand the current practices of local government's use of VMT and travel data within their jurisdiction and develop a guide on how to navigate various sources of VMT and travel data. Before we get into the research in more detail, let me ask one question using the poll. Jennifer, can you launch the poll? So the question asks, where do you currently obtain VMT data for your projects? We have 6 response options. And if you have other specific information, feel free to do that with others on the bottom, and then please describe with more detail. We'll give you a few minutes to respond to the poll, and then I'll report the results. Jennifer, I don't think the chat function is available. Is it working? I don't see the chat box where I can put some information.
The chat is working, yes.
Meeting chat. Okay, so far 78% of participants did the poll. Let me give you a few more seconds to close the poll and then get to the results. I think it stopped, adding more respondents, so I think we can close it. Yeah, so the results shows that the top answer that was chosen by 50% of the participant is the regional government, either Caltrans, County Transportation Commission, metropolitan planning organizations like SCAG, followed by the big data platform like Streetlight or Replica. And it's actually a tie, right, with the local governments, either county or city governments. And then like 25, a quarter of respondents said that they never obtained a VMT data, which is understandable. Yeah, so I think that's very helpful to understand where you are with this access to VMT data. Right, thank you. So we're presenting this report, and the full report is available on this link. So if you are interested in like learning more about our project, you can feel free to go to the link and then download the full report. So a little bit of background of this research. In California is a two Senate bill, SB 375 and then SB 743. SB 375 is about greenhouse gas emission reduction goals that Tom mentioned, by adopting sustainable community strategies at MPOs, which then would be implemented via coordination of land use and transportation planning. SB 743 is the shifting transportation impact metrics under CEQA from LOS level of service to VMT, vehicle miles traveled. Since land use decisions are made at the local government level, their role becomes more important to understand and analyze land use impact on VMT and greenhouse emission reduction in this context. So in that, local governments now have a greater need for VMT and other travel data. But the problem is they have not had much experience in collecting, using, analyzing such transportation data in the past. They're not necessarily, planners in local governments are not necessarily transportation planners, nor engineers by training. So in this paradigm shift, how have local governments dealt with the data needs so far and what challenges they have? That's a research question we're trying to answer here. For that, to answer that research question, we used mixed method approach using the survey of large pool and an interview of small samples of key informants. Two surveys were developed for local governments and the MPO respectively. And then we asked their experiences in this implementation and also their own role in this change. The survey data collection was done in 2022. And for the survey, we got 96 cities, 14 counties, and 11 MPOs participate in our surveys. So if you're one of the respondents, thank you very much for your participation and time. The overall response rate was 21%, which is not that high, even though we tried multiple strategies to reach out to, all 400, more than 400, local governments in California. But our sample has large size, medium size, and small rural cities and counties, and also MPOs in various contexts. And from the survey responses, we identified a few agencies that are either best practices or potential leaders in this implementation. So we invited them for a Zoom interview for about an hour, and that was done in 2023. So for the interview part, we have 2 cities, 4 counties, 1 COG, and 8 MPOs that provided their perspectives in more detail. So our results. From our survey to local governments, we asked where they are with the implementation of strategies for greenhouse gas reduction via land use. About 2/3 of respondents said they incorporated VMT mitigation strategies into local land use planning. 72% considered VMT reduction in their recent housing element update. 70% here said they have another plans other than general plan that included VMT reduction goals. And we have found 46% expressed a neutral stance on their achievement of significant reduction via land use planning yet. And we think it might be that it is only a few years since the changes became effective, right? And then the last one is like in responding to the changes, 43% of the respondents used new sources of data or tools for land use planning. So a little less than half of the respondents actually adopted a new source of data for this implementation of SB 375 and then 743. We also found that local governments that use the new source of data or tools for implementation are more likely to integrate VMT mitigation strategies in their general plan update. They're more likely to think positive about the potential reduction of greenhouse gas emission by implementation of SB 743, which is quite expected. But from interviews, we noted that many of them had not had many projects that required full VMT analysis so far, and the overall sentiment was still very uncertain, not too much familiar with its impact yet, or it's a little early to say something about the effectiveness as the whole implementation process seemed fairly new to them. And then we looked at what data local governments used in their implementation. And we classified the data set by level of sophistication, like network data set, like roadway network or truck routes, transit route, as a basic level. And some performance indicators, like the level of service or traffic volume counts, things like that, are intermediate level. And the real-time and open source type of recent technologies as advanced. And another classification we have here is 3 modes: automobile, transit, and active transportation. As you can see from the table, basic type is most frequently used, advanced level is least used by local governments. And for basic level, all modes, like 3 modes, automobile, transit, active transportation, are almost evenly used, while in intermediate and advanced, automobile mode dominant pattern is found. This may be partly due to VMT analysis required by the change. VMT is about vehicle trips, right? So the focus of the data collection was vehicle at the time, not necessarily including multimodal aspects of impact of development, including non-motorized transportation, because of the limited, resources and time. When we ask about the sources of transportation data they use, 44% of the transportation data local governments used are their own data collected for their land use planning, zoning, traffic impact assessment, or CEQA. Transit data comes from transit authorities, that's 18.5%. And then third largest source is the consulting firms that they hired for developing and updating plans or specific projects, that's 14%. And then county, 10%. Yeah. And surprisingly, MPO only accounts for 6.8% of the source of data, transportation data that local governments use, which is different from what expected, because the MPO is the body of the regional transportation model. They have a lot of related transportation data sets for the entire region. So we expect the MPO's role in sharing or having transportation data relevant to VMT analysis would be higher than that. Possibly one reason of that low account is that the MPO's focus is regional modeling at the regional scale. So their products or output from the models are not appropriate to be readily used at the local level. And also a lot of assumptions are there with MPO's model, which is not easy to explain or comprehend, or there has to be a caveat for using such data from MPO at the local level. And then we asked the reasons for not using some transportation data. Almost half of the respondents mentioned the data set was not available, and followed by expensive to purchase, like if they're considering like third-party vendor data sets, right? And another reason was the requiring too much resources to process, like the staff time, skill set that they don't have, or software to purchase to process some of the data. So for these reasons in this pie chart, new data sets are not that frequently used by local governments, right? As only like 43% of the local government respondents we have adopted a new source of data set for this implementation. And then the need for specific data on transportation was asked. Real-time automobile traffic volume was the most needed as it directly addressed the VMT-related needs, followed by the bike parking facilities and bike and pedestrian counts, which is expensive to collect. And then real-time traffic volume data from vendors comes at a cost, right? And then GTFS data set requires some skills and time to process and use. So from the list here, we see some of the reasons that were discussed from the previous slides. Right? Why some data was, interested in accessing, but they end up not using it in the implementation of the SV Senate bills that we're talking about here regarding VMT reduction. And for effective planning and implementation of these Senate bills, planners and local governments agreed that they need more data. They need more transportation data, they prefer publicly available data set that are easy to use. Not the data set that doesn't require too much processing, and readily or more intuitively understandable, right? Something that is very easy to, access, analyze, and interpret. That's definitely, and also free to access. Those are the conditions that they prefer. So for sure, more data would be welcomed by the local governments and planners there as long as it comes free with training and support. But there's a concern shared with us. The changes regarding VMT and greenhouse gas emission reduction are so data-driven. And the analytic methods are becoming more intricate. Their data required are not easy to calculate, like the VMT per capita, and then like setting the thresholds of significance under CEQA, right? So calculating them, accessing the data sources, and interpreting the results is not easy compared to the level of service that has been used for a while. And as a result, the reliance on third-party consultants become critical in implementing the changes at the local level, which could be frustrating and worrisome in some places. Yeah. So big players and private parties might benefit from this trend of heavily data-driven approach, but not all can go with the flow at the same pace. So there was concern raised from the interviewees. And then our MPO survey reveals the MPO's perspective on local members' practices regarding these two Senate bills. MPO understand the overall implementation progress among their jurisdiction, among their members in their jurisdictions, but not necessarily sure about the adequate data used by local governments for VMT and greenhouse gas analysis. And it sounds like there's a lack of communications in terms of data access or exchange regarding this VMT and greenhouse gas emission reduction analysis. But we found that MPOs are willing to share more transportation data and tools with local governments to help the state meet the VMT greenhouse gas reduction goals. So we asked which data set were frequently requested by local members and what kind of data did they have that might be helpful for local government's implementation. Frequently asked data sets are those in yellow, base VMT/AADT dataset and forecasted VMT/AADT datasets. And MPO suggests the ones in green as useful for local governments that are not frequently asked to share. They include OD matrix, transit ridership data, pedestrian and bike counts, socioeconomic characteristics, travel time matrix, mode share scheme data. Yeah. And these might be useful to understand travel pattern within and around their local government's local jurisdiction and help local governments identify strategies on shifting some vehicle trips to other modes or reducing length of vehicle trips. So that's an idea. Not necessarily like VMT as a data that they need to understand, impact of a development on VMT and greenhouse gas emissions, but there are other sources of data that is readily available by MPO to share that can inform decisions at the land use by considering travel pattern within and around their jurisdiction. And then from the interviews, we found that MPO's regional travel model is a go-to source for VMT data, but it is originally, the MPO's model is originally developed for regional scale analysis and use, so not readily appropriate to use as is at the local level. So there's a concern at MPO to share the data. And also from the local side, as I mentioned before, they're not modelers by training, so not necessarily understand all the behind the scenes and assumptions and scenarios. And one-time training, by MPOs about the model is not enough for them to, grasp the caveats, for using the data at the local level. So local staff expressed difficulty and excessive cost and time on their end to obtain meaningful VMT data for small geography. From our research, we found a handful of very similar framework or of best practices of VMT screening maps, VMT impact analysis tools developed at city, county, COG, and MPO levels for project reviews. So project level reviews. However, we identify only 2 cases applied at the general plan level, which is the city of Elk Grove and city of Woodland. Elk Grove is using their local tier travel model. So city has its own travel model to analyze VMT impacts of the general plan updates. And the Woodland used urban footprint, one of the sketch tools shown in the image on the slides, to compare 2 alternatives of development phasing and scenarios and compare the results with those of regional model. So it is really rare to find land use plan level implementation of SB 743. And as you probably know from prior research that was done in 2019, that many small rural jurisdictions were not in favor of the bill 743. These are direct quotes from the interviews on challenges that they had as a small rural jurisdiction. I don't know if you can read the text on the slides. For example, they say they do not have the lane to add additional housing in the core. So infill development is impossible, right? That's what they're saying. But that's one of the ways, to reduce VMT per capita, right? And then they mainly have agricultural land that is preserved by the general plan, right? So the state bill doesn't consider their unique context. And also a lot of, discussion about the rural areas' daily travel needs that are not necessarily met by public transit or biking or walking. And then a lot of, interviewees mentioned that the VMT mitigation measures suggested by the handbook are not working for them. They have the best air quality in California, like for some rural jurisdiction, but they're wondering why they have to reduce VMT and greenhouse gas for other jurisdictions. Those are just direct comments from the interviews. Yeah, and some jurisdiction will cost more for development, and then housing and development, it will be detrimental to their economic development, right, due to their unique context. And then we also noted that local agencies still use level of service for other purposes other than CEQA. So they're, having this VMT measures at the same time, they still use LOS for other purposes. We also found that big data use was found to be a dominant trend, mostly led by MPOs or consultants hired by local agencies so far, due to its level of granularity benefiting small geography. Streetlight and Replica are the two vendors that have been used in California. Streetlight by SCAG, City of Citrus Heights, Placer County, and then Replica used by SACOG, Fresno COG, Santa Barbara CAG, Santa Barbara County. At SCAG, as you probably are aware and start using it, SCAG has a new contract, like since last year, with the Streetlight to provide access to Streetlight with its members. As SCAG members found it would be more beneficial at the local level when it's used at the local level. There are concerns on big data as its model is another black box based on a sample data from cell phones. But we found that it is accepted among our interviewees as one of the alternatives for transportation data when it's accessible at an affordable cost. It can be an alternative, right? To, understand travel behavior around the development and, estimate or analyze VMT from that. We found Shasta, RTA, and with 4 other MPOs in California have been working together to develop online land use data collection framework and feed the updated land use information into the land use model, and then feed outcome of the land use model into the regional travel model for their region. And the massbuild.com is one of the models they looked at, which provides an interactive web-based platform to update and exchange development projects, permits in the pipeline. And then CommuniViz that is in that, its screenshot is on the slide, is basically the ArcGIS-based software to do land use scenario modeling. So that those are kind of a combination of the recent effort that are investigated by these 5 MPOs in Northern California. Since we found that local governments do not have the capacity to run its own land use or travel models, maybe MPO could do something like this for their members as long as they have up-to-date land use information provided by local members. This seems to be the model for future collaboration between MPOs and its members. Speaking of the data exchange and sharing between MPOs and local members, these 5 MPOs in California are identified as best practices, like SCAG's regional data platform that provides their data, tools, and resources to its members. MTC's basis is similar to local data exchange of SCAG to comprehensively and effectively collect locals' land use data for their RTP. SACOG and Fresno COG did a very good job of sharing SBA 743 resources on their website, so that their local members identify regional databases, framework, and best practices to model for their own implementation. So from this finding, our recommendation includes the 3 folds. For sure, more funding support. The sentiment is that if data-driven implementation is the way the state thinks the direction from now on regarding VMT and greenhouse gas emission, there should be more support for accessing and securing data and assisting modeling improvements. But without so many strings attached, meaning reducing requirements as local governments with the funding, right? They are small and resource scarce, like nonprofit organizations. So with so many requirements that comes with funding, they're heavily burdened by meeting all those requirements, but didn't have enough time to fully implement its original intent. And then centralized leadership for VMT mitigation exchange, banking, and fees is, there are many pilots and feasibility studies that are ongoing in California about this VMT mitigation, exchange, banking, and fees. But then, so people hear a lot about those cases, but nobody actually started one yet. So definitely there's more like centralized leadership on, collecting the findings from these pilot studies and feasibility studies and kind of have a discussion about what's the next step, right? And then timely coordination and consistency across State Department to reduce confusion and overlaps in the requirements. Yeah. So that summarized the study findings from the research, and I'll hand mic over to Dr. Kim so that he can introduce the data guide.
Thank you, Sora. Let me share my screen. Everybody see my screen? Okay, so thanks for everybody here, and then thanks for your presentation, Sora. And then my name is Joe Kim, I'm a faculty member at Cal Poly Pomona. I'm a co-PI of this project. So I'm gonna take care of this second part of this presentation. What I'm gonna actually briefly introduce to you guys is the sort of like a product out of this survey. After we took a survey and interview, and we found sort of like a knowledge gap in the transportation data, which means the local planners are not so familiar with the transportation data. So we were thinking of what's the best way to improve this knowledge gap. So the way that we develop it is to develop this data guide. So basically, we developed two data guides, and primarily the purpose of these data guides is to sort of like help to understand available data so that local planners can use the transportation data in their land use decisions. On the top of that, we also want to develop the sort of best practice. So by introducing the best practice so that local planner get to know this best practice so that they can give it a try to follow up this best practice. So basically, I briefly explain what this data guide is, and then I briefly introduce the data that I like to show you, share with the audience. Actually, all those details of this data and the source can be found in the report. So please refer the report for your information. So the first data guide is like a transportation data available. I think there's a little misconception in the local levels that, oh, transportation data is not available. Also, transportation data is, how can I say, not available, also is not localized. So we developed different levels of transportation data, that local can take advantage of it. So we kind of like typologize all those data in multiple levels. It goes from, surprisingly, as you saw in the survey, I think there is little discrepancy between California overall and that SCAG level. I think SCAG regions doing really well, but as you saw from the survey, we found large local jurisdiction do not even take advantage of transportation data. So there's a lot of local jurisdiction don't even cares about the data. And then there's multiple levels of data from very minimum, how can I say, entry level data to the little more advanced level data. So the purpose of this guide is to show you guys availability of data, and then you can pick whichever data that are applicable for your situation. Obviously, locals has a variety of different situation, right? Large city, metropolitan city like Los Angeles, and there is small village in the Imperial County maybe, and some jurisdiction has very good local knowledge, so they may not need the data. They can take care of by themselves without those data. But the levels of complexity, land use complexities, and variety of different things. So the purpose of this guide is to show the multiple options that you can choose whichever data that you want to use. So the first typology is network alignment. This is even not a transportation data, how to. It just shows the transportation network. There's no traffic volume data. It's maybe the maximum that you can get is get from this data is like a functional class. What is the highway? What is the major road? What is the local road? And things like that. But from national level to the regional level, the data is there by different modes. Data is there. It's those data is simply you can download it from those resources. You don't have to create your own account. You don't have to pay for anything. So data is available. So you can just quickly download it and use it as far as you guys have like a GIS licenses. Next one is a static volume data, which means that showing the traffic volume at the particular location on the roadway network. It's not only for the automobile, but also for the transit. So, and active transportation. So in the SCAG region, I don't think we have to talk about in details because SCAG offers a street light license for the local jurisdiction, right? And conventionally, many local jurisdictions collect their own traffic count. So that's the many local jurisdictions take advantage of it, and they put the effort and take advantage of it. But nowadays, SCAG offers this big data based street light data. So I think every single jurisdiction in the SCAG regions they can take advantage of this street light data. So for example, if I show you an example, so this is like a street data that I have license. I got a license through the SCAG. So if you explore street light data a little bit, and you can get the traffic data, active transportation, roadway volumes, and AADT, and all those data is available. So this is an example that I want to show you. And this is like a pedestrian and active transportation data that I pulled it out from the street light data. So it's the entire LA County is my study area. So if I zoom in, I can take a look at it, how many pedestrians on the street, right? And historical longitudinal data is available here. So as far as I know, SCAG also offer a lot of like training sessions on the street light data utilization. So this is an example. We can take a look at how many people on the street, how many cars on the street based on big data platform. So that's an example of static volume types of data. Next types of data that I categorize is the kind of traffic flow. Traffic flow means not only the number of cars or number of pedestrian on the street. This data is showing where this traffic comes from and where this traffic goes to. So in the transportation jargon, we call OD matrix, right? Origin and destination matrix. Where people comes, origin, and where people goes to, it's a destination. So once again, SCAG data has origin, that street light data has origin and destination matrix, you can generate it. Also, there is some national level data like a CTPP and LODUS data is available. So CTPP and LODUS data is available at the census tract level, I believe. So how much of a local level data the local jurisdiction demands, that's a little questionable, but if this census block group level or census tract level data is good for your land use decision and land use policy exploration, I think there is resources. Also, this is not for the entire SCAG jurisdiction, but LA Metro actually built this something called locus data dashboard. This covers LA County only, but this is also gives very details of automobile origin and destination, transit, and active transportation as well. So here some example is, so as I said, SCAG offers this street light data, and if you explore this street light data, there is like origin and destination analysis you can do by the zone. And the zone that Streetlight use here is census tract level. So you can explore and you can create a census tract level origin and destination analysis. This is an example of Lotus data. I just put it in here. I just captured it as a sample. I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't have time to walk you through from the very beginning to the end. So I just create a few snapshots as an examples. So please excuse me. And this in this case, I just captured sort of downtown, the Pasadena area. So this Lotus data, you can take a look at it, where these employees who worked in the downtown Pasadena lives. And so where they live and then where they come to work, right? So obviously you can download this data and you can do your own analysis, but this interface provide origin and destination of workers, and you can take a look at all top 10 and all origin to the destination, which is the downtown Pasadena in this case, and different types of workers, like workers' ages, workers' earnings, and industrial their job types. So details there. Limitation of this Lotus data is that this is only about commuting trip. So work, home-based work trips. So it does not cover entire trips. That's the sort of like a drawback. Similarly, if you use the CTPP data is provide a very similar result and still similar data, and you can generate it. I don't have like an example for the CTPP data, but I mean, you can take advantage of CTPP data as well. So this is an example of LA Metro's locus data. Right now, I shows that all this is like once again origin destination matrix. So I can, as you can see, there's a travel mode here. So I can take a look at all different types of travel mode or active transportation, transit, automobile, all different travel modes. My connection is kind of like disconnected, but this is by census block group level. You can choose your origin and destination and the census block group level. And there's like a historical data you can choose, and day of week and different residential status, whole different set of settings you can do. And you can take a look at, your traffic flows from origin and destination. Actually, this advantage of this locus dashboard is that you're not allowed to download your data. This is simply, you can take a look at it, but I don't think you can download this data on your personal computer. But as you can see here, whole details, there's like beyond the commuting trips, it has home to regular and home to others, different sort of like travel mode or trip purposes also available. So if you explore this data, I mean, you can have a really good understanding of traffic patterns in your local jurisdiction. And once again, this is only for the LA County because it's developed by LA Metro. And next slide. Next classification, like a scenario simulation, like Dr. Baek earlier pointed, briefly touched upon, like urban footprints and things like that. Those kind of urban the scenario tools allowed you guys to build a different land use scenario and calculate VMT and greenhouse gas emission calculation. You can do it. And also another piece of software on the top of urban footprint is ArcGIS Urban, which is like a SCAG. It's kind of like a has a partnership with the Agility and provide like this, I think, trainings and license as well, I believe. And you can use ArcGIS Urban for the like a scenario building. Scenario in this case means land use scenario. And if you plug in this land use scenario, and you can calculate the different VMT and different greenhouse gas emission reduction. So you can compare your scenario and you can choose your land use scenarios. So there's a tools available there. And finally, the one last step, as Dr. Baek already debriefed about this, and there's this very, how can I say, strong movement on integration of land use and transportation models. I mean, in academia, this topic has been discussed a very long time. I mean, this is nothing new, and there's a lot of different models like urban sim and community Vs, and that Dr. Baek briefly touched upon, but a lot of like commercialized the models as well available. But on the top of that, now we notice that a lot of NPOs and Council of Governments is working on, really practical level model integrations, which is good to see. And hopefully this may help land use decision at the local level a lot. Also kind of integration over those two models for the sustainable land use and transportation decisions. And next, guideline is particularly for the SB 743. So we explored what kind of tools the locals and states and regional agencies use for the SB 743. So the way that we found it, there's two particularly different types of tools have been used. One is like a screening tool. The other one is the estimation tools. And screening tool has multiple levels, like from state levels to the city level. So screening tool is nothing but sort of like the estimation of the VMT values in very specific geographical regions or geographical units. Estimation tool is just sort of like a real calculation of a VMT generated by different types of development at very specific location, which is like a parcel level location. So if I briefly introduce those tools, so VMT screening tool, like a statewide one is available, and regional agencies, they built multiple regional agency built VMT screening tools, and then City of Aircraft, the local level, even these cities developed their own screening tools and use it. So if I briefly goes over, I mean, this is a state level VMT screening tool. So you can, I mean, if you don't have any tools in your regions, then you can take advantage of these tools. So if you zoom in and if you selected a very particular TAZ, and then it will tell you, so it will kind of TAZ in your block group level, right? So if you zoom in and select your block group level, and it will give you how much of home base VMT credited, home base work credited, and home base, the employee home base work VMT and residents home base work VMTs. This particular block group is generated. It will show you, so where this each individual block group is in comparison to the city and county NPO level, where this block group's VMT level is, it will tell you. So once again, this you don't have to have any account, and you just simply visit this web page and you can take advantage of it. So in the case that local jurisdiction for now do not have any VMT screening tool for the SB 743, I mean, this can be one way to take a look at, right? And next. So this is like another VMT screening tools that developed by Sacramento Council of Government. So their geographical unit is a little little unusual, but they created these hexagonal shapes and covers the entire their areas. And they shows that the red, if you're interested in building some in the red area, that's the area would generate a lot of VMT, and the green is better, and so on and so forth. So they kind of give you a general idea in the region, which area development in which areas may generate more VMT and less VMT, and that kind of screenings, the first level screening, these screening tools provide. And next group of tools is the VMT estimation tool. This is like a real calculation by particular development type at the particular location. So that means these tools require a lot of information. But if you're interested in building these kind of tools for your jurisdiction, this maybe help you to, this presentation may help you to understand what's going on. So this is San Gabriel Valley Council of Government to develop the estimation tools, evaluation calculation tools. So simply zooming into the particular parcel and select, right now I can remove this. See, so you can select very particular specific parcels, and you can continue, and you can type in a lot of, basically a lot of information, right? So for example, I don't know if you have time, but let me quickly do it. So, I want to build a residential land use, and then I just kind of go. I can choose, so as you can see, you need a lot of information. If you type the information, and it will require more information, right? So in this particular case, I'm planning to develop the residential sort of like a development, and then I have to say this many dwelling unit I want to build, for example, and blah blah blah, and you have to add a lot of information here. Then these tools calculates the VMT generated by that particular development type. Also, this tool allows you guys experiment with all those mitigation policy and mitigation strategy. So eventually it will calculate the VMT generated by this development. So basically, from the city's point of view, whenever the developers approach it to the city and they try to propose any development, you can ask them to go through this screening tool and calculate the VMT that may generate it. City of LA actually has very similar calculation tool in Excel format. So if you type in, once again, this is the examples that I'm trying to develop like 150 units apartment complex that replace 30-room motels. And then first line screening is that this is the VMT analysis required. Then I can go and I can do the VMT analysis here and exploring all those mitigation strategy, from parking to the transit, education, encouragement. You can see the long list of the options that we can play with it. Then finally, we can generate very similar output like this one, so that particular types of developments will generate this much of VMT, so on and so forth. So basically, developers can explore their developments plans and proposals along with their mitigation strategy, so they can estimate their VMT generation. As I said, this is these types of tools is tied up to the very specific locations. So this is for example, this is the location of that development address. So they, in the case that developer interested to propose any development at a very specific location, they can play with their development type here. So if I summarize everything that we presented today, as you can see, I mean, we talked about today a lot data, but big picture is that this is not about the data, but this is about more sustainable land use plan and land use decision. So how transportation data play a positive role in the in the decision making at the local level on their land use decision making. So that's the goal of the research, and that's what we intended to do. And then this work is following up. Some of you in the local level, you may receive the email from the SCAG kind of inviting you guys to a new survey. If you participate in the survey and respond to the survey, I really appreciate your participation. So right now, the SCAG and I collaborate together, and we doing a sort of like another types of survey and other types of research at within the SCAG jurisdiction. It's not a entire state of California, but this research and survey is kind of connecting all those dots together. So what does that mean is that when local jurisdiction make their land use decision, this land use data should come to the SCAG MPO. Then SCAG can make their land use the transportation plan, sustainable transportation plan based on the updated land use data from local. So in order to help that connection, SCAG developed like something called LDX, Local Data Exchange Platform, so that this collected data comes to the SCAG through the LDX. And then SCAG also generated a lot of transportation data and willing to share that data with the local jurisdiction. The SCAG's intention is that they created this something called RDP, Regional Database Platform, and SCAG want to share their transportation data through the RDP. So all this, process. So local jurisdictions sustainable land use decision comes to the SCAG through the LDX, and then the SCAG can make a sustainable transportation plan, and they can share data through the RDP. So right now, the survey research that we're doing is that how LDX and RDP help this, virtual circles here. So that's the ongoing works and ongoing research. So the bottom line, the fundamental big picture here is that, we want to help local jurisdiction to make a sustainable land use decisions that's compares of the sustainable land use decision come to the regional level so that SCAG can make their sustainable transportation plan properly. So that's it of the presentation.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Professors Do and Sora, for your great presentation and very, very useful insight information here that we have today on the survey results and also the data and tools that you shared with us today. We didn't receive a lot of questions in the chat, but we would like to stop here and see if the audience has any questions. If you want to type them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to ask questions about the data or the tools, or any interesting questions that you have, or maybe you can share with us your project that you are working on, or your issues with finding VMT data or any other transportation related data, so we can, we have two experts here on the call, so they can give you some consultation services. There was one comment in the chat from Edward, and he already left, about Lotus application, about the data accuracy and so forth. So just some information there. But I believe the biggest differences between Lotus and CTPP, of course, they provide OD data, but Lotus, they use administrative data, and they have their geographical boundaries. The geographical unit is actually smaller than census tracts, but the number of indicators or the variables available within CTPP is actually less. So that you saw earlier, just basic employee income categories, and also job. And some types of commuter. But if you use CTPP, that's basically derived from census data. And so CTPP actually provide the smaller geography is at the census tract, and they actually have a lot more indicators because they use census data to cross-tabulate to create specialized tables in there. So depends on what you want to do in your analysis. You can use both for that.
If I add one more thing, Tom, thanks for your clarification. And as Tom says, CTPP is based on census data. So the trip generated by CTPP also only covers commuting trips. So not all trips. So that's something that everybody may want to remember.
That's right. Thank you, though. And a lot of great information already embedded in the report that we shared earlier. But feel free to reach out to us or me, and we'll be happy to provide additional assistance. We do have several questions here in the chat from Harold. The first one is, thank you for the very informative presentation. I am wondering if there was any information that came from the survey on whether the lack of VMT analysis expertise or the perception/actual lack of available data affected the outcomes of the projects, whether it be delays to the project or increased costs.
So it's not necessarily from the survey, but from interviews. Even though they have something in place with whatever they have available, whatever they have access to at the point of development of the tools for the implementation, they don't have much many projects that actually go through the full VMT analysis. So that's the I think response that I received. So they don't have that. They didn't have much experience in going through the full process designed by the law to mitigate the VMT per capita or something using the measures presented by the handbook. So, but then this data collection was done in June 2023, so it's already 9 months since the last data collection. So I don't know whether there's any update on the recent implementation that a local government has experienced. So I don't know if that answered the question. But if they don't have any mitigation measures, for example, right? Then they have to work with whatever they have. For example, as a county has a simple mitigation measure for any excess VMT, like to, put a sidewalk here where the county needs to fill the gap in the sidewalk system within their jurisdiction. So that's kind of one of the mitigation measures that they have. So simply, building the sidewalk from the projects, but then they also have expressed concern about actual, monitoring that mitigation over time, right? And then, but because if it's within the same jurisdiction, the costs and benefits are all, kind of shared within that jurisdiction. But then this VMT mitigation bank or exchange and fee programs that at the regional scale probably not practical because the whatever benefits has to be spent within the jurisdiction where that cost is generated, right? Cost is impacted. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're also seeing more regulations and bills that are out there, such as AB 2334, which is to promote affordable housing development. And one of the indicators that they are using in that bill is the very low VMT. So you can see that this VMT requirement is getting rolled out slowly and slowly upon that SB 743.
And also kind of one answer to why we didn't have much of the cases in our interview that kind of, a certain project has been delayed because of the lack of data is we chose the, best practices and those leaders in this implementation. So they're, exploring different options that they have based on the available, best available data that they can have access to from the, MPO and then from their consulting firms and from their own data and travel models. So we weren't able to, actually talk to the jurisdictions that are a little bit behind in the game. So I think that's why I didn't hear much about that issues that the question, the person asked that question. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Hara, for your question. The next question that we have here from Mike, great presentation, very informative. Thank you for that. What is the benefit of using VMT per service population versus separate figures for population and employment?
Service population, usually typical approach is VMT per capita, including the residents living in those areas. At the TAS level or census boundary level, or VMT per employees for non-residential uses like office and retail kind of uses. They kind of consider VMT per the employees. So service population, I'm not too familiar with that. But for all the examples that we kind of learned from this research is having those two categories, VMT per capita for residential uses and VMT per employee for non-residential uses for any new development.
Also, the separation of employment and population is sort of like the old classic transportation modeling approaches. But when the commuting trip takes a majority of trips. So when commuting trip is very important, it is good to separate working and population where they live and where they work, and so figure out the commuting trips. But nowadays the how can I say ratio or percentage of the commuting trip is declining. People take much more other types of trip than a commuting trip. So the trend is not kind of like separating them together, separating each other.
Yep. Thank you, though, for that clarification. And if you looked into the report and go on the FAMPeers VMT plus tool, they do have the VMT at the residence-based and employee-based VMT available for you for the state level. So you can use that to kind of understand the requirement behind that. Okay, another question that we have here is about heavy duty trucking VMT. If any of the tools that you presented though earlier have that information available, and OD, from trucks going to and from warehouses or ports.
Yeah, the streetlight data has the truck VMT data. So you can pull out truck VMT from the streetlight data. Also, Caltrain provide longitudinal truck VMT for the major highway and expressways, so on and so forth. So there is, I didn't actually show that Caltrain data today, but in the report, you can find the source of the truck VMT data from the Caltrains.
All right, great. Thank you, Bill, for that explanation. Any other questions from the audience? There's one that just came in. Thank you. Are there any recommendations to correlate zoning codes and VMT reduction? Good question.
It's a good question. It's $1 million question. So I'm not 100% sure what exactly mean correlates, but that VMT estimation tools that I introduced, that's really you have to specify zoning types and land use types for the new development that's proposed. So that in that sense, the zoning code can be tied up to the VMT calculation, right? And then mitigation strategy there. So that's how they can combine it together.
Yeah, I would also add to SCAG's Connect SoCal plan, which is regional transportation and sustainable community strategy. We have identified a number of different policies and strategies in terms of land use to help us to reduce VMT and improve GSG, reduce GSG. And so, some of the policies that we encourage is obviously, TOD, transit-oriented development, within high quality transit-rich area, job centers, neighborhood mobilities, and so forth. So there's a number of strategies and policies that we put in place there in the plan to make sure that we meet our state and federal requirements. So I can't, we can talk offline there, and I'm sure there are, a number of research out there that really quantify this relationship, between VMT or GSG with different land use types.
I would like to add the mixed land uses, by placing, workplace and retail near housing, you can reduce vehicle trips generated from that development. That's why we're, as part of this effort of reducing greenhouse gas emissions via land use planning, we promote infill development and mixed use development, right? So yeah, I think, so VMT reduction and zoning, its correlation, I think it mixed land uses definitely zoning code that allow you to reduce VMT generated from the development. But I think it's more of the location of the new development, where it's located, instead of just the zoning itself, right? So inner city location where the infrastructure for public transit is sufficient, versus somewhere out like in the periphery of the county or city where these resources are not there. So I think that what's matter is more the location, not necessarily the zoning itself.
Oh, Tom, it looks like you're muted.
After so many times of using Zoom, I'm still messing up. So I just want to say thank you so much, everyone for attending our session today, and hopefully the information that we presented to you was helpful and help you with your local planning activities in terms of VMT and transportation and land use planning. So if you have any further questions or if you needed technical assistance in the future, please contact us. The information is already there in the chat. So and then thank you again. And so and please spend about 2 minutes here to answer to respond to the survey here to let us know if we are doing well, if this session is good, if you found the information is useful, and if you have any future sessions or topics that you would like us to tackle on, such as AI, maybe. So that's one topic, right? So let us know, and thank you, Do and Sora, again, so much for your time today to share with us your great research, survey findings, and the tools and data that are very beneficial to our local jurisdictions and also outside of the SCAC region. So with that, thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.